On today's show, March is here, which means it's time to start looking ahead to the postseason. Regular season, the Cavs, I don't know how much they have left to prove, but we're going to talk about what there is left to learn for this team. Plus, Spencer Davies and I are going to draw up our ideal postseason brackets for the Cavs. We'll talk about all that and so much more on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. Joined today by Spencer Davies of Cleveland Cavaliers on SIRG.org and a few other stops that you might know him from. And before we get started, I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you also go sign up for the Locked On Cavs daily newsletter because it is your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That is LockedOnDaily.com. The Cleveland Cavaliers are 54-10. They have the best record in basketball. They are off to one of the 8 best starts in NBA history, and they have throughout this regular season, Spencer, I think in a way that you and I certainly didn't expect. And, I know I was high on this team coming into the year, not this high. I don't think anyone was. But they've dominated the regular season in a way that nobody realistically, even the most optimistic of people, did not expect them to, which means now they have proven, I think, just about everything they can prove in the regular season. And it's going to be looking ahead to what they still need to prove in the postseason. Like I'm sitting here and I'd love to know if you disagree with this, but I sort of think that Sunday's win against Milwaukee is the last statement game, if you will, or statement that they'll make during the regular season.
It's an interesting thought. I think the one they have an opportunity to do is Friday in Memphis. I think also kind of might be one to say, all right, put our stamp on this one, sweep the season series, and then kind of move on from there. You look at the calendar, they still have one against New York.
2 against New York.
Maybe a couple against New York, I should say. But I'm with you. I don't know what else is left to prove other than fast forwarding to mid-April and then starting the whole thing up, because it's the time of the season where, you hear the term dog days, and that's 2 points of the season. One, before the All-Star break gets here, and then 2, right, when playoff seeding is starting to lock up, when playoff berths are clinched, and then you're just waiting to get to the real season, which is what happens after the 82 games that we have up until mid-April. So it's hard at this point of the season to be as focused. It's human nature. I think, Danny, you could even probably attest to this for us as media and going to games and stuff like that. You're probably kind of in that mode, like, all right, I think I've seen what I've needed to see. Let's get to the postseason. Let's see what it looks like under, a huge spotlight against legitimately competitive teams that are looking to knock the Cavs off, because they are going to have a target on their back. They've had a target on their back for the last couple of months, and clearly the last week was not their best basketball. Kenny told you, Donovan Mitchell told you, most of the guys were really like
your eyes told you. If you just watched them play, I think you could understand that.
Yes. And, part of that is not being as focused, not having as much energy. And again, the human nature part kicks in to where what else is, it's crazy that, you look at the way they played against Chicago, and you go down to the wire and then you go on a 32-8 run or something to close that game. And then you have the Miami game where you're down by 7 with like 7 minutes left, 6 minutes left, go and win that game at home. And then almost a carbon copy in Charlotte the other night, and they're down by 9 with 5 minutes left, and they come back and win. Those were not the best games for them to play. They were facing teams that were either shorthanded or clearly just not on the same tier as them. But what spoke to me was after Friday, when Kenny was talking about how it's a good thing that they were in close games. And I was really kind of like, what? Like usually he would come out, not rip the team, but he would say, yeah, we just didn't have it. That was a stinker. Like, he didn't make any reference like that whatsoever in that Charlotte game, which really spoke to me. And I think it's the level of understanding that we are at this point in the season now. Let's kind of get fast forward to the next part, but you can't do that, unfortunately. 18 games left to go, and I thought that they played pretty well in Milwaukee last night. The best of that 4-game stretch that we just talked about.
Right. I think against Portland and Chicago and Miami and Charlotte, they didn't look great. They won because they were the better team. And I do agree with what Kenny said as far as the close game aspect of things go. Like, this is a team that has been terrific in the clutch. Their clutch numbers are outstanding this year, but they haven't necessarily played in a lot of clutch moments because they're 54-10 and they have a point differential of above 11. Like, their average game is a win by 11 points. They have more 10-point games that they have won more games by 10 points than most teams in the NBA have won, period, this year. Like, they've been historically dominant. So when you have that, you don't have a ton of that experience. So I do think that is, if you want to find a silver lining to maybe not playing your best basketball, it's having to find a way. That said, I'm with you. I don't think there's anything left to prove in the regular season. I think they've proven that they're on Boston's level, and I think they've proved, and Oklahoma City, like, I think it's the Cavs, Boston, and OKC. I think it's very fitting that in the 6 games the Cavs played against those two teams, they went 3-3 this year. And I think that they have proven that they're better than everybody else. They went 3-3 against the 2 other best teams, and that means they are 51-7 against the rest of the NBA. And I just think that's very fitting for how this team is. That said, Spencer, I do still think that there are things to learn about this team. Maybe not things that they need to prove, but I think that there are things that for us as observers of them, I think are important to learn. And I think it's probably important too for the Cavs, because you hear Kenny Atkinson all the time talking about, taking feedback from certain matchups and diving into data, right? When he talks about certain lineups. And I do think that there are some things that we still need to learn about this team. And the one thing that I'm immediately going to point at is, how does DeAndre Hunter look alongside the core 4? Because when he was traded for, I think a lot of people made the assumption that he was going to be someone that was maybe not plugged into the starting lineup right away. I think it always would have been fair to let him get up to speed with a new city, with a new team, but that eventually he would replace Max Strus. Obviously, that has not happened as of now, but I do think that the Cavs are not doing everything they can if they at least don't get him more minutes alongside that group to see what it looks like, because I do think when the postseason gets here, that's a lineup they will need.
Yeah, we haven't seen too much of DeAndre next to Evan and Jarrett, I think, is also what we have to kind of look at. Defensively, you obviously love the potential that brings to the table, and then we know that DeAndre's been playing more with the ball in his hands than we probably would have pictured before. It's not just being a stand there, catch, shoot, or just attack closeouts. He's actually bringing the ball up in some instances,
right?
And creating for himself, creating for others. We saw him be used as a hub in a zone package against Miami the other night that I think was really good, solid information for them going forward to know who they can trust in those situations. DeAndre, what's nice about him is that he can pretty much play next to anyone, so that's good. But you're right, we haven't seen him too much with the core 4 itself. I don't know how many minutes they've played together. That's probably something in a metric that you would have in your back pocket when you ask Kenny a question about it, I'm sure. But it's interesting.
So according to, let me interject here because I do have the data. According to Cleaning the Glass, that group has played 40 possessions together, which is not a ton of time.
Wow, that is so little.
Right. And it has been good. Like, the net rating in those 40 possessions is plus 22.5. But I do think that, 40 possessions is not a big enough sample size to fall back and say, oh, the net rating is great. Like, this group really works. No, you need a bigger sample size. But that to me is kind of the point here, is that we need to, I think, learn just how good or maybe not good that lineup is together. And I think that having a bigger sample size there, even if you're not starting games with that group on the floor, making sure that that group gets minutes on a game-by-game basis, I do think is something that the Cavs can do so that they are as informed as they can possibly be when the postseason arrives.
Well, I think primarily DeAndre with the core 4 would be your lineup against Boston, and I think that's why you want to see how they play with him. Yeah, so that's probably why there's the curiosity there. They started the game together. I can't remember which one it was. I know it was because Max Strus had an ankle injury or something, and he was out for like one game.
So that was the game against Minnesota. That was the very first game that DeAndre Hunter played. He was in the starting lineup.
Okay, yes. I was going to say, because I remember that Max was out, and it just kind of worked out perfectly for DeAndre coming in, post-trade. So that's probably where the majority of those 40 possessions came from, because as I just mentioned, not as much these past few games, but the games before them, they were closing out with the front court of DeAndre and Evan, and then you had Darius, Don, and Max alongside them. So Jarrett Allen was the odd man out. I'm sure you've addressed that on this podcast, but Jarrett was the one that had to kind of take the short end of the stick, so to speak. And, DeAndre and Evan were getting kind of the benefit of the doubt, because in those matchups, they had a little bit more versatility offensively. They didn't lose much on switches defensively. So Kenny was kind of having experimentation with that. I'm sure that we're going to see some variation of the core four with DeAndre Hunter going forward in the regular season. I don't think that's all we're going to look at. Kenny's too smart to do that. But I think the DeAndre in the starting lineup thing is particularly for Boston, as you just mentioned when you said, that obviously that's probably the best matchup for them because of the wings that they present and the challenges they present on both ends of the floor. So, but I'm intrigued. Yeah, I'm intrigued about that. I'm also really intrigued by, the closing lineup we saw in Milwaukee last night with Dean Wade out there and Isaac Okoro in the mix, because we had questions about the rotation going into the postseason, and, who are the 10th guy, the possible 11th guy in a pinch. And it looks like they're still kind of searching for that. Javonte Green, we thought, once he won that, helped win that game in Chicago, that maybe he might burst in there and see if he had an opportunity to overtake that. But it looks like, Kenny's kind of rolling with Isaac and Dean and Sam. And that obviously Ty Jerome and DeAndre Hunter are locks. So, and Max Strus as well to that point. So you can start playing that game too.
Right. There are a couple of other lineup things that I do want to talk about. Plus, we are going to get to what does the ideal playoff bracket look like for the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll do that next right here on Locked on Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Skims. We're going to talk about the underwear I'm wearing right now, because when I found out that Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I was a little confused. I didn't know necessarily what to think. And then I got a couple of pairs shipped to me, and I have to tell you that I've never worn better underwear than the underwear that Skims sent me. It's absolutely an incredible product. I've always hated the underwear that would like bunch up on the sides and wouldn't be comfortable. It would just lose its shape, if you will. Skims, that doesn't happen. It is the best underwear that I've ever worn. I typically try and stick to the same style of underwear, but I've cycled through a lot of different brands throughout my life, and this is the one that I've been the happiest with. It's truthfully the most comfortable underwear that I've ever worn. So what you need to do if you want to feel as good about your underwear as I feel about mine is shop Skims Men's at skims.com and in Skims stores. That's SKIMS.com. And of course, in stores, let them know that we sent you. So after you place your order, select podcast in the survey, select our show that's Locked on NBA in the drop-down menu that follows. Plus, if you're looking for the perfect gift for somebody, Skims, of course, has sizes for women, men, kids, even pets. You could get your pet in something with Skims. Skims is, of course, the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA Basketball. Again, shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That is SKIMS.com and in Skims stores. Thank you again for making Locked on Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. So the DeAndre Hunter thing is what I'm going to immediately look at, and the pairing between him and Evan Mobley is maybe the most important thing too that we can figure out, because you mentioned how often the Cavs will close games with Jarrett Allen on the bench. And I do think that it takes a special kind of teammate that Jarrett Allen is to make that possible too. Like, how many guys in the NBA that have made an all-star team that had a legitimate argument to make an all-star team this year? I do think that he maybe shouldn't have made the game, but I think there was a legitimate conversation for it. And that guy's not in the game in the most important minutes. Like, that is not something, and you know this from covering the league, that is not something that flies, but it's okay with Jarrett Allen as long as the team is winning. And obviously they're doing a ton of winning. So in 261 possessions this year, Spencer, according to Cleaning the Glass, So that is a decent sample size. It's obviously far from a full season, but DeAndre Hunter has played with Evan Mobley 261 possessions this year. The Cavs have a net rating of plus 24.1 in those 261 possessions. So that is a big enough sample size to where you can look at it and say, okay, this is something that is worth talking about. It's not like the starting lineup where it's only been 40 possessions. 261 is enough to say, okay, this actually means something here.
It does. And I think it goes back to the conversation we were having earlier before the break was it doesn't make you lose much defensively other than the rim protection that's more switch heavy. DeAndre is 6'8", but he has also got a 7'2" wingspan, so he's able to...
I've heard that before.
Just a few times, right?
Yeah.
He's able to contest underneath, but he's also got a big enough body to actually measure up and firm up with those bigs in the paint, especially because there's not too many, those bruising fives around the league this year. Like not as much as there's been in the past. So it's not like super hurtful to have somebody like DeAndre, on the block trying to push a little bit with the left hand or the left forearm. And Evan, as we know, can switch on to anybody defensively on the outside. He is really covering a lot of ground. He can move his feet well, and sometimes he even baits you into driving past him so he can just block you. So he's got a lot of ability on the outside, whereas DeAndre is strong enough on the inside. And even if they don't switch, they're very capable individual defenders on their own, fighting through screens and even just using the length of their arms. It's really as simple as that defensively. And then offensively, as I mentioned earlier, DeAndre's doing a little bit more with the ball in his hands, but you're also having Evan bring the ball up in a lot of situations where you see him hit the hit back, DHOs, a lot of different options that Evan has with the ball in his hands as a hub or in the face-up game, or even just bringing it up the floor. And really, you can up the pace with that group too. They can run the floor. They can really run the floor and speed you up. So I think that's why that unit in particular works. And, we're not even really talking about the impact it has on the backcourt too and everybody else around them, because that just opens stuff up for them.
Well, I mean, you immediately, I do think defense when you think of that pairing, because what's the first thing when Kenny Atkinson is asked about DeAndre Hunter? He mentions his size, he mentions the wingspan, he mentions ACC Defensive Player of the Year once upon a time at Virginia, like the pedigree that he has as a defender that, I don't necessarily know that he reached in Atlanta. And I do think a big part of that was the pieces around him and maybe not necessarily him. And obviously he's playing alongside somebody in Evan Mobley that I believe allows him to play more aggressively on that end of the floor, because he's never been a big steals, never been a big blocks guy, but I do think that he can play more aggressively. But when those two are on the floor together, it's actually the offense that is great. Like defensively, they're really good. They're 96th percentile. They allow 106.5 points per 100 possessions, which is really good. Like that's a top 5 defense. They score 130.7 points per 100 possessions when they're on the floor together. Like there is no way for opponents to slow them down offensively. And it's not just, one lineup that's doing the bulk of the damage. The top 3 lineups that those two have played together in all have an offensive rating of 123 or higher. The most common one has an offensive rating of 145. Like it is ridiculous what they're able to do on offense together.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that most of those Donovan's on the floor. I'm assuming
right.
One of Strus or Merrill's out there, because I'm thinking a lot of those are going to come in the off-ball actions and the movement that they have around the half court, getting open from beyond the arc. You saw plenty of that in Milwaukee from Sam Merrill and Max Strus, both just creating havoc as they're weaving around, the off-ball screens and all that stuff to get open. And that's because they're, one giant unit. They're one giant machine together, and that is really deadly when you can defend the way they do and push the pace the way they do and win the possession game, which Kenny always talks about, and getting more shots up than your opponent. Even if it's not quite as efficient, you're still getting up a ton. Like they got 43, 44 threes up yesterday in Milwaukee, maybe
47, 43, or maybe 49, but 43 of them were considered open or wide open. Like the shots exactly they generated against the shots they generated against the Bucks were outstanding. Like I was sitting there watching that game, just like, man, this feels like a game with how good the looks were And, wide open shots can kind of be a little arbitrary at times, but there were a couple of them where like Donovan Mitchell could have checked for wind inside Pfizer for him and he didn't make the shot. And same thing with Darius Garland. Like those are two 40+% 3-point shooters. They're going to make that kind of shot more often than not. And the Cavs were routinely missing them and they still won that game by 12. Like to me, that was a game they should have won by like 30 because of the quality of look they were generating.
Yeah, well, I very much so agree. And, like that is the kind of opportunities you want for, your role players, the Sam Merrills, the Max Struses, the Dean Wades. Can we talk about Dean Wade, how good of a game he had in Milwaukee yesterday? Like just defensively. And here's the thing too, Danny, like I know this kind of, branching away from the Hunter topic, but just the way that they played defensively off ball in Milwaukee yesterday, denying the ball for Damian Lillard, doing the job of altering shots, but also going, getting through screens, getting over screens, and really making it difficult on Milwaukee to get any kind of clean pass away. I think that was really something that the Cavs haven't done the last few games that I feel like was really well done and well executed throughout the game. Really, I mean, maybe the third quarter or not, but that's just Giannis being Giannis. And I just chalked that up to that. But overall, I thought that was a really good defensive game for them. And I think the defense is what opens up the other stuff on the other end of the floor. Because again, we go back to the possession game and we go back to how they can really hurt you in transition, but also how quickly they snap passes to each other or skip pass to the other side. Donovan Mitchell did a great job of that in Milwaukee last night, of being a playmaker when he drew 2-3 bodies inside, spray outs. Darius Garland always does that with the Nash dribble. They have so many different playmakers and guys that can make, a bunch of different feeds to the outside or to the inside. Like, they are so capable with that. One more thing on the Hunter thing, by the way, something I noticed. He wasn't really billed as a rebounder coming into the league, and he hasn't been to this point, but he's been crashing harder by game, and I think that that's something that Kenny's really trying to unlock with him.
Yeah, that has been a big difference in the Cavs, and I think it probably sticks out a little bit more to be on the offensive end of the floor. Like the Cavs' offensive rebounding rate has really skyrocketed, and I don't know that that's all because of DeAndre Hunter, but I think
Max
he's a
part of it.
big part of that. Right. Max Strus had 9 rebounds against the Bucks. He had the most rebounds in the game for the Cavs. Like that is something when that happens, I don't know whether you should feel great or feel bad because you have 2 bigs that play a lot and the fact that he out-rebounded them, but you do need help. Especially against a team with as much size as Milwaukee. I think that has to be sort of a team rebounding type of battle. But the Cavs could see Milwaukee in the postseason this year. They could see a bunch of teams. So Spencer and I are going to talk about what is the ideal path to the NBA Finals look like for the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Wayfair. Your home should reflect your style. And with Wayfair, it's easier than ever to make that happen. Whether you're looking for a simple refresh or tackling maybe a big project inside your house, Wayfair has everything you need right in one place. They have a huge selection that makes it easy to find the perfect piece, no matter the space or the budget. That's something really important. You don't want to have to sacrifice what you want because maybe there are things outside of your budget. With Wayfair, it's not going to be like that. From cozy furniture and stylish decor to kitchen essentials and outdoor must-haves, Wayfair has it all. And again, at prices that fit your budget. The site is simple and you can compare styles easily, and your order is going to arrive fast with free delivery. And you might be surprised because everything from storage solutions to patio decor can be found, making it your go-to for all things home. So head on over to wayfair.com and find something that is your style today. Again, wayfair.com, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show on YouTube. If you're watching, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. And Spencer, breaking news here. This just came across. The Cavs are going to be the 1 seed in the East. I don't know if you want to react to that, but they will finish with the best record in the Eastern Conference, which of course means that they are going to face the number 8 seed by virtue of the play-in tournament. And the way that I look at this is there are 4 teams that I think are pretty locked in to being in the play-in. You've got Atlanta, Orlando, Miami, and the honor of somebody has to be 10th goes to the Chicago Bulls, who might lose 50 games and still finish in 10th place. So Is there a team of that group that you look at and say, I'd really rather not play them?
Yeah, I think I always have trepidation with the Miami Heat. There's something there about that group of players, their style, the way they grind you down, and the fact that they also have a little bit of a weight off their shoulder now that the Jimmy Butler stuff has been solved. He's over in Golden State. Looks like, Andrew Wiggins has fit in well there personality wise. I know he hasn't played too many games, obviously, but you're seeing obviously Tyler Hero, what he's able to do, Bam Adebayo being more aggressive. It looks like they have a little bit more of a, and Davion Mitchell too. My goodness, I can't believe I forgot Davion Mitchell. He's been playing really well for them too. So they would definitely take physically a lot out of you. I don't think they would win the series, but I think that they would legitimately, grind you down. So of that group that you just mentioned, yeah, I would say the Heat would be that number one option out of that I would not want to face.
Right. I think I'm with you there too. And I think a lot of it has to do with the zone defense that Miami plays. And yeah, the Cavs play zone too, but in talking to some of the guys in the Cavs locker room after they played the Heat last week, some of them made comments just like Miami is the best at that. Like they're really, really good. They know what they're doing. And the Cavs, I think, do a really good job of running it, but that doesn't mean it's easier for them to solve offensively. Because that was one of the big questions I had for a lot of guys was, hey, you guys run a defense that's very similar to the one that Miami has success with. Does that make it easier for you to attack it when you see it on the other end? But Miami does it so well, and they've done it for so long that that's not really the case. So that I do think is the one thing that would be a little bit concerning. Now, that said, I don't see a world in which the Cavs lose in the first round. Like this Miami Heat team is not what the Miami Heat team that went to the finals as an 8 seed was. It is not that group. They do not have that within them. The team I actually do think, and I'm going to rule Chicago out here just because I don't think they're capable of winning 2 play-in games. Like I just really, truly don't. They would obviously be the answer because they're terrible. I do think if the Cavs got to pick their opponent, and if I got to pick the opponent for the Cavs, it would be Orlando. I just do not think, and they probably have, one of the best players of that group, whether you want to say Bam is the best player, even though he's not having a great season, or Trae Young is the best player in the play-in, even though he's not shooting the ball that well this year. But, Orlando's got Paolo Banchero, who has been getting better and better, but I don't see a way in which Orlando could score enough points to keep up with the Cavs in a series. Like, I think that is the series that most likely would end in a sweep.
Yeah, I'm completely with you there. Out of that grouping, the scoring would not be something that I would be any sort of, afraid of. When, especially watching that game in Orlando the other night when they were in TNT, like that was an absolute kicking. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like they took their souls in that game. Like it was really tough to watch. Because they really had 2 options. It was Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. Aside from a couple of KCP mid-rangers that went down, there was not much going for Orlando that night. And the thing is, too, with Orlando, they're going to be missing Jalen Suggs. They're going to be missing Mo Wagner, the guy that really had a ton of that villain role in that series last year that really made it tough on the Cavs. This year, it's just been a little too late for Orlando. They're still fighting their butts off. I respect the hell out of them. I respect the hell out of Jamal Mosley. But at some point, you just keep chopping the tree down, and it just kind of collapses. It's just really tough to see them keeping up with the Cavs. I would say that would be, I would go 5 games max in that series.
I think max. I think it's the most likely outcome is a sweep for the Cavs. And I think it's probably, with how good the Cavs are, I think no matter the first round opponent, like that is the most likely outcome is a sweep. But I just don't see how Orlando is going to be able to score more than 110 points in any of these games. And, Orlando's defense is good, not great since Jalen Suggs went down. And I don't see how Orlando is going to keep the Cavs below 110 points in any game. So I just think that that's a game that it's a series where it's really hard for me to see any avenues if the Cavs are healthy where Orlando is able to win multiple games in it. And then the next series, of course, will be the Cavs against whoever wins the 4-5 matchup. So right now, I think with Jalen Brunson's injury, it's worth mentioning New York, but they have a 4-game lead over Milwaukee right now and the tiebreaker for that number 3 spot. So really you're looking at Milwaukee, Indiana, and Detroit as 3 potential matchups in the second round. Are there any of those that you look at and say, yeah, I'd just rather not see the Cavs do that? If you are the Cavs.
I think that you don't want to see Indiana.
Okay.
I think Indiana's been playing really well post All-Star break. Tyrese Halliburton finding that mode. Ben Matherin's been really good for them off the bench. You can never overlook Pascal Siakam, an NBA champion, somebody who's really taken his mantle over in Indiana. And, Miles Turner, somebody that's been around for a long time. He's seen a lot. He's gone against a lot. And I feel like he's definitely someone that will have a chip on his shoulder going into this postseason. Like, he's always in the trade rumors. He's always, kind of the guy that's not getting the ton of love. And Miles is someone I have a bunch of respect for because he's stuck around. He's stuck through it. I don't know how many coaches he's had in Indiana to this point. And he's still out there doing it. And he on the court, he provides a very vast challenge because he can stretch the floor. But he's also on the defensive end, a great rim protector, somebody that gets rebounds. So it's a probably Indiana that I would not want to see. How cool would it be though if the Cavs ended up facing Detroit? I want to see that so badly. It would be really cool, I think, just for the sense of the overall storyline of that game.
The storylines
awesome.
would be incredible with the Cavs and Kenny Atkinson facing JB Bickerstaff. I would be, I think, surprised if the Pistons got to the second round. And the Pistons have been a really good story. And since January 1st, they've got the 6th best net rating in basketball. They're 22-11 since the calendar flipped. Like, they've been really, really good. But I don't see how they're going to win a playoff series against the Bucks potentially, or against the Pacers potentially, which I think they beat the obviously Knicks. I don't think that they beat the Knicks, because we have seen JB in the postseason too. Mm-hmm. Like, JB famously has one road postseason win in his career. Now, at some point you have to break through, but typically I don't think you break through with a really young team. Like, you break through with a team that has been there before, not with a team's first go around. So it's hard for me to see that. I probably agree with you that Indiana is the team you don't want to see, but I will say, and after watching the Cavs play Milwaukee 4 times this year, winning all 4 of them, it's hard for me to see the blueprint for Milwaukee to win 4 games against the Cavs, but they're also the only opponent here that I look at and say, yeah, the Cavs don't have the best player in this series. Like, I look at a series against the Pacers, I'm taking Donovan Mitchell over everybody Indiana has. I look at a series against the Pistons, I'm taking Donovan Mitchell over everybody Detroit has. I look at a series against the Bucks, yes, I'm taking Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley and maybe Darius Garland before I'm taking Damian Lillard, but I'm taking Giannis before I'm taking anyone on the Cavs. And that, to me, is the one thing that you look at and say, okay, could that flip the series?
It is best player in the series. Does that mean that he's going to win you two or 3 games in the series itself? Like, does he have that ability? And you obviously saw him on a minutes restriction on Sunday do what he did to the Cavs in the third quarter, especially
35 minutes. So I don't know. Like, he played a lot of minutes.
Yeah, I know. But he did. He was getting whatever he wanted to inside. I give a ton of credit to Jared Allen for doing the job he did on him. I give a ton of credit to Dean Wade for trying, and he's usually good at, staying straight and taking the hits pretty well. Evan had some trouble with him yesterday. Giannis is a brute force. That is someone who will force his way into the paint, dunk it on your head, and now he's got a deadly fadeaway mid-ranger from like 10 feet. That's really something, a part of his game that I think a lot of people have to respect. And now you have another part of his offensive arsenal that's going to be tough to take away. But with what you're saying, I mean, to me, the Cavs just have the team. They have a bunch of all-stars, but they have the team of all-stars, which is, I think that wins a lot of battles, man. I do. It's just, they're tough to take down because, as you saw yesterday, I keep referring to Milwaukee because it's the last game we have. but
right.
Their backcourt didn't make anything.
They still won by 12. Like, the Cavs,
they still won by 12.
I think played very well. They were never in danger of losing the game. Yes, Milwaukee cut it to 4, but like, that never felt like a game the Cavs were going to lose. And I do think, particularly the game against Miami in this winning streak, and maybe the game against Charlotte too. Like I sat there watching I think the Cavs are not going to win this one. Against Milwaukee, I never had that feeling for a second. Like it's just, okay, they're going to hit shots at some point because they're getting way too many wide open looks for the best shooting team in basketball to not make enough of them. When they have a game, like if Donovan Mitchell would have had 25 points, just an average Donovan Mitchell game, not even a good one, the Cavs win that game by 25. Like that's the thing that I think gets lost a little bit in this.
Yeah, no doubt. And the same thing goes for, Darius Garland, who hasn't really been playing his best basketball offensively. Okay, not saying that not playing his best basketball. He's not been doing his best shooting here as of late.
He's been in a shooting slump lately.
Slumping as a shooter. He's still making the plays. His floater is off. It's a little bit short right now. So that's something to keep an eye on. But he's still playmaking, still giving the body up. He's still playing with the same swagger. Like he's still doing the kiss thing. He's still screaming out and one when he attacks. Like, so that's not changed. But in the sense of the shooting slump, that's also something that maybe is because of the attrition of the season, and something that Spencer brought up on our podcast, Courtside with Cavs on SI, is that maybe there's a little fatigue there too for Darius because he didn't play quite as many games last year. It's just a thought that maybe he hasn't had this kind of workload in a little bit. So just something to think about there. But yeah, like I said, team wide, this is why they're so dangerous. Did you see how many players scored 6 or 9 points yesterday in the box score? It was outrageous.
Right. Like no one had more than 17. Max Strus was the team leader in points with 17. Like that's the Cavs have so many ways to beat you. And I think that's alongside the fact that, so the way that I frame it is the Cavs are a team that is greater than the sum of its parts, but the parts are really, really good. Like the parts are all stars, but they still find a way to be greater than that. Spencer, very much appreciate you taking the time to do this. Everyone go check out Spencer's stuff at Cleveland Cavaliers on SI, his podcast. You can find it anywhere you get your podcast, also rg.org. Spencer, very much appreciate the time, man.
No problem, man.
Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review, friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I'll be back tomorrow talking about the Cavs taking on the Brooklyn Nets.